The people who understand global economic realities understand how dangerous and precarious the entire world is right now, because once the yen falls away, because the yen basically is about to disappear, as is the euro.
As is the dollar.
Well, the euro is worse than the U.S. dollar falling. We've lost 95% of the buying power of the U.S. dollar since 1913. We've lost 20%. Social Security, I tell myself on fixed incomes, have lost 20% in the last 2 years. They talk about no COLA for Social Security Acts the last 2 years. They say, oh, inflation is only 3 or 4%. They don't include food and fuel, the two major inflationary forces. Inflation is really, Europeans would say the inflation is 10 to 12%. It's truly 10 to 12% here. Without a COLA for Social Security Acts, we've lost 20% of our buying power.
You have to be a congressman to get a COLA.
Well, you need to be a congressman to get a COLA. Exactly. So now you have Obamacare, and you have 3 wars, and you have all of this stuff, basically spending money that we don't have. They said on the front page of the USA Today last Tuesday that the average family of 4 with a median income of $54,000 has taken on $562,000 worth of that U.S.
Well, they haven't really taken it on. They've been given it. They've been having it shoved into their faces.
But they've taken it on, not consciously, but they have assumed.
It's called indentured servitude.
And that will be for their kids and the following. If we don't get back onto a precious metal standard quickly, there is no more. Every currency in the world is a fiat currency being supported by their own central bank. The only one who will buy our bonds right now is
the Fed.
You'll see it here on the cartoon. The only one who will buy our bonds now is the Fed. They don't buy them from the government at the low rate. They buy them from Goldman Sachs at a higher rate, because the former president of the Fed was the former president of Goldman Sachs. So you'll see it on the cartoon. But basically, the Fed wheels these trillions down the hall to the Treasury. The Treasury buys off all of our bad. Basically, it's bad. A lot of it's bad debt. No one else will buy our bonds. No one else. We thought, China will just buy our bonds forever. No one will buy our debt now except our own Federal Reserve Bank, our own central bank.
And here comes hyperinflation.
Here comes hyperinflation. Right now it's 10, 12%. As oil and gas and food prices spike, it'll be 15, 20%. There'll be no way to deal with the spike in interest rates. This is the scariest part of this whole thing. We have been artificially keeping interest rates pretty much at zero for years now. Do you remember back in the late 70s when you could go into a bank and get 24% interest on a CD? That was 78. You could go into a bank in 78 and get 24%.
Really?
Give $100,000 and say, yeah, I'll take your 24% interest on that CD.
Sure.
Now, what's happened is, because we've artificially kept the interest rates low, when those once we lose that credibility worldwide, interest rates are already rising. All smart investors are shorting long-term government bonds right now. They're buying these triple ETF. They're shorting.
Yeah, I'm doing some of that.
But nuts not to short when they've been going down. The interest rates. Basically, it's a crazy world now in the bond market.
But they keep manipulating things, though. The Fed works in conjunction with the other central governments, or central bankers, and they keep manipulating things. So even though the normal, flow of events should lead to the rising rates and the bonds crashing, they keep manipulating everything and buying a few more days or a few more months so that crash doesn't happen.
Right. And the politician can never get elected by telling the truth about this. Why would anybody elect a politician who tells us that we're heading into possibly one of the greatest worldwide depressions of all time, worse than 1930s? Because now there's no will or willingness to bail out any of these banks. What these mentors of mine are predicting is you'll have banks like Goldman Sachs failing.
I want to see Lloyd Blankfein swinging from the gallows pole.
Well, when these large banks start failing and it starts consolidating in the hands of, they say there'll probably be 3 or 4 banks that will control everything in the end.
And that's
housing, according to these mentors, in 5 years, the housing values will be 20 to 30% of what they are now. Housing values, because of the incredible spike in interest rates. One of my mentors says that the stock market, when the lights go out, the stock market, we think was bad in 2008 when we lost 4,000 points in 6 weeks. He says when the stock market collapses this time and there's no way to stop it, we could go from 12,000 in the Dow to 200. One guy says, no, we can never go down to 200 from 12,000, but we could go down to 2,000. Virtually overnight, within a few months.
Well, there's another dynamic there, though, and that is that there are people with a certain amount of money, and big institutional investors, too, that have,
But
money.
They're going to be shorting once they understand what's...
They need to put that somewhere, though. So
they can short. They can,
well, everybody
leverage. They can leverage. I mean, there are people in the crash of 2008 who were making 300-400% by shorting the S&P.
Yeah.
They were shorting the S&P.
That's what I'm setting myself up to do right now, too. I'm expecting, or I'm hoping something like that happens.
People aren't...
But the point I was trying to make is that there's a certain sector, I think, of the economy that will take on the aspect of like a precious metal inflation hedge.
Right.
So really good
modify that
global, dividend paying, well established companies will owning shares in those things may be as good an inflation hedge as owning gold and silver.
Right.
Because they got real assets and they have real businesses.
Right. We were talking about real assets.
So
that's the only thing that's worth anything.
So things like that will be a counterbalance against a total collapse in the stock market.
Here's another thing that these people,
unless of course the dollar completely
collapses, like what happened in Yugoslavia. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Or Germany or whatever.
People when Yugoslavia collapsed, that loaf of bread would cost $1 suddenly cost $5,000. People were wheeling wheelbarrows full of worthless money to buy a loaf of bread.
We're thinking in Germany it was $1 trillion marks.
During the Weimar.
Yugoslavia was worth. I actually have some samples of the currency.
The Yugoslavian currency?
Yeah. Over these different stages.
When it went from worth 100% to 1%?
It went from 1 to 100 to 1,000, and like there's this 100 million mark, which is worth about 6 cents or something.
Right. Well, hopefully that won't happen to the U.S. dollar. But what these people are basically predicting is if and when the crash happens.
Thanks.
Is that what will basically happen is you'll have the middle class basically going underwater in their homes when the interest rates spike. I mean, people who have variable rates, not necessarily people who have fixed rates, but people who have a variable rate. All those people are going to basically lose. Everybody who's in the market, people like myself, I lost everything in the crash of 2008. Why I can't hold an argument with my brother, because he can throw it in my face. Hey, if you're so smart, why did you lose all your money in the crash of 2008?
I learned more of getting divorced about women than I ever did.
It is.
You don't learn anything. You don't learn anything if you're always successful.
You learn by suffering.
You only learn by failing.
I go on
Either success or feedback.
One of the great all-time motivational speakers, Les Brown, a black man, one of the phenomenal, arguably the greatest motivational speaker of the 20th century. Les Brown, nobody's even heard of him. His big thing is you succeed through failure. Mm-hmm. It's a series of failures. It's a series of losses and exposure to these awful experiences. And those are the people who basically rise to the top, the people who have the great impact in the world, the Mother Teresa's, the Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings.